Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 cooperative board games. Now, cooperative games are actually not my forte. I don't play too many of them, and when I do play them, and the ones I enjoy, tend to be on the lighter end of the spectrum. So if you're looking for the highly and heavily involved, complex cooperative games, then you're probably not going to find many of those kind of games on this list. These are a lot breezier because that's what I tend to enjoy when working with others. Now, before I get started on the top 10 games here, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Magic Maze. Now, this certainly is a chaotic and unique game as you are trying to reintroduce these fantasy characters to their weapons of choice. And you're going to do that by traversing through this shopping mall, going up escalators and going under these kind of shutters and things, trying to, again, get these characters to their particular weapons. The twist on this game, though, is that each player isn't assigned to a character, but they are assigned to a particular direction. So, for example, I might only be able to move the pieces north. My opponent might be able to move them left or right, and so on. As the levels progress, certain players might only be able to move them up an escalator and so on. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to do all this, but you are not allowed to communicate with your team either. So you can't just say, look, I need you to move them to the left. No, they have to suss that out for themselves. And that is where this big red pawn comes into play, where if you are stuck and you need your opponent to do a move, but they haven't quite seen it yet, instead of telling them that, you just place this big red pawn in front of them saying, you know what, it's your time to do something. Have a look at the board and take action now because we are against a timer here. So definitely a high pressure game. You know, you are under a lot of pressure. It's real time. Sometimes you cannot see what the other players can see, so you need to be highly alert and on the ball at all times. The game does go through a difficulty scale, so it starts relatively simple and easy, but as you go through the scenarios, they get more complex and those individual abilities get broken up more so that you are taking on more responsibility. So yeah, this one's very interesting. I would actually like to go back and play this one some more because it's been a while since I played it, but if you're looking for a unique experience, albeit sometimes a stressful one, then take a look at Magic Maze. At number 9, I have a relatively new game with Sky Team. So this one wasn't really on my radar at all. A friend introduced this one to me and I was quite impressed by it. So this is a 2-player only cooperative game that does have a degree of worker placement using dice as your workers. And the idea of this game is that you are trying to successfully fly and land a plane. There are different scenarios you can play through which do vary in difficulties. And these dice are used to do things such as manage the altitude or manage the pitch of the plane so that you're landing in the right, you have to be in a certain orientation at certain stages in the game and so on. And there's more modules you can add in as you go through things. And much like Magic Maze, you do have limited communication. So sometimes you have to think outside the box and maybe read the gameplay language of your opponent rather than listen to their words because they can't tell you what's happening. But if they're placing a low value somewhere, that might be a hint for you to maybe play a higher value and so on. And of course, a metagame is going to build up as you play more and more with the same person. So the gameplay is super fast. You can play through a scenario in 10 or 15 minutes, which I thought was a nice treat. And yeah, all in all, I thought this was a very nice experience that I can certainly see why captured a lot of people's attention and a lot of people are enjoying this one. So that is Sky Team at number 9. At number 8, I have Cross Clues. This is another real-time game. However, this one is more of a party-style game, definitely a lot more light-hearted, as you are trying to help your opponents by giving clues to find particular spots on this grid. So at the start of the game, you're going to set up this grid. Along one axis, you've got a bunch of words. Along the other axis, you've got a bunch of words. And you're trying to find a particular clue that matches a particular grid reference. If you're successful on that particular reference, you're going to get a point. And if not, of course, you're not going to get those points. But I like the way it's real time. Everyone's just spitting out clues at all times. Again, sometimes you've got to be prepared to, this is a very difficult clue to give, so I'm going to discard this one and move on to the next. And you're just trying to get as many points as you can. And despite being kind of a frantic game, the stakes do feel quite low. And if you do poorly, then you can easily just change the bunch of words and go again, because each round only takes around 5 minutes to play. So it definitely has that addictive quality where you want to play several games back to back. But I really like this one. It's very affordable, small box, could accommodate a lot of players, and everybody's going to know how to play it. So that is Cross Clues at number 8. At number 7, I have Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Now this is the furthest thing from a frantic game. This is the kind of game where you just want to, put the whole evening aside, take your time, and just try to solve this murder mystery. I like the concept of this game where you're just reading through this activity book, which will give you a particular scenario, it'll tell you what's happened, who's been killed, etc. And then you are free to do what you want to investigate this by using this kind of telegraph or telephone directory and speaking to different people, visiting different locations and trying to decipher what has happened. Some of the clues are pretty obscure, some of them are more obvious than others, and you do need to be prepared to think outside the box and sometimes fill in those gaps of logic. But at the same time, you want to be making sure that you are avoiding the red herrings and going down those rabbit holes that are going to completely waste your time. Definitely get you to sit back, just enjoy the experience. Don't put yourself under any pressure, because the game does actually come with a scoring system where you are competing against Sherlock Holmes, and he is obviously ridiculously good at the game, so you cannot really compete with him. I just play this one at my own leisure and just see if I could solve the mystery and answer those questions that arise at the end of the book. So a lovely, again, very leisurely style game. If you want to call it a board game, I'm not sure, but I personally do. That is Consulting Detective, or the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and there are several of these that you can choose from to get tons of replayability. At number 6, we are back to the frantic gameplay with Quicksand, another real-time game. And I didn't realise how much I enjoyed real-time games until kind of going back through this list. Now, this one is a game that uses sand timers, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get these sand timers from one end of this track to the other by skipping along these tiles, and these tiles will have a colour assigned to them as well as a shape. And on your turn, you'll have a hand of cards. You're going to play one of these cards which will either have a colour on it or a shape on it. And if you play a colour or a shape, you're going to move all of the sand timers on those colours or shapes, flip them over and onto the next tile. So although this is a real-time game, sometimes you do not want to rush, because if you take turns too quickly, then you're going to keep on flipping the sand timers over, meaning that the sand is going to be very quick or close to running out. So you want to sometimes sit on your turn, wait for the sand to filter through, then take your action, flip them both over at the same time, then they'll start again from scratch. But of course, as you're going through these more difficult scenarios, faster sand timers are being introduced, or additional rules are being introduced where you can't communicate with your teammates, etc., or you might have to travel further. And it's a very unique experience. I do have to be in the right mood to play it, but the gameplay is very quick. It only takes around 5 minutes per round, and it's fun, if you're in the right group and everyone's in the right mindset. So that is Quicksand at number 6. At number 5, I have Lord of the Rings, The Living card game. So this is a somewhat of a deck building style game, as you will have your personal deck and your own personal character. And this deck is going to consist of like abilities or equipment that you can put on your character. And what you're trying to do is that you're trying, of course, work together to try and overcome these different scenarios, which do vary in difficulty. There are a ton of them out there, so you're never going to run out of things to play. And you are trying to kind of exploit the strengths of your characters. Some of them might be really good at progressing the mission. Some of them might be good at fighting the enemies off. And yeah, it's all about trying to do the right things at the right time, commit to the right things at the right time, because if you do one thing, you can't do another thing. So of course, you might want to be keeping your fighters back to fight off the enemies. It's a very difficult game. It's a very punishing game. And to be honest, I was pretty bad at it, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. And I was always impressed about how different each of these scenarios could be. Some of them might be very simple, just destroy a bunch of enemies, whatever. But some of them could be go and rescue your teammate from prison, and then you've got that character in your team, and so on. So it's a very loose framework that could definitely have the potential to inject so many different creative ideas into it. and you're not going to get bored if this is your style of game. Now, I don't play this one anymore simply because it's the kind of game that would reward so much investment. This is a lifestyle kind of game where if you keep on pouring efforts into this one, you're going to get increasing rewards and enjoyment out of it, where I generally tend to enjoy more variability. But despite that, I think this is an immensely enjoyable game. It's very well designed and has inspired tons of other games as well. So I would love to have the time to play this one more, but unfortunately I don't. But despite that, I still think it's one of the best cooperative games that I have ever played, especially if you love Lord of the Rings. If you don't like Lord of the Rings, there are other IPs you can choose as well. I think there's a Game of Thrones one. There's Marvel Champions as well, which is loosely inspired by this game. And I believe there's even others as well. So like Arkham Horror ones, for example. But that is Lord of the Rings, the living card game at number 5. At number 4, I have Switch and Signal. Now this is a pick up and deliver style game where you're trying to get particular goods to particular locations on this map. And each turn, these trains are going to automatically move. Some are faster than others, but what you're doing is that you are playing cards from your hand in order to change the track location or orientation so that the trains are moving efficiently and not going to be on a crash course to collide with each other. You can turn green lights to red and so on. And it's all about trying to be as efficient as possible, keeping these trains flowing, not to waste any movement, and of course to keep them safe. I do like the way that you can think, I'm going to do this turn, then you can do this, that, your turn. So you've got the good communication thing going on here. And there's 2 different maps you can play on. I would love to have seen more maps, to be honest, to be introduced with this game with some expansion content. I'm not sure if that's on the horizon. But still, I love that gameplay, and I generally enjoy pick up and deliver games anyway, but I think it works extremely well when it's in a cooperative setting. So yeah, I really did like almost everything about this game. I just thought it lacked a little bit in replayability. So, if there was more content out there, I might even be interested to reacquire this one. It was that good of a design. So that is Switch and Signal at number 4. At number 3, I have Legendary, in particular the Marvel version, because that's the version I've played a lot of over the years. Now, technically, this is a little bit of a cheat because it is a semi-cooperative game where the player who's done the most damage will be the ultimate winner. But I've always done away with that rule. I think it actually hurts the game and it encourages selfish play, which is not a good thing in a game like this. So this one, you are trying to, or you have an ensemble of course, Marvel heroes, or it could be Buffy the Vampire Slayer if you're playing that version, or Alien or Predator, X-Files. There's tons of versions of this system. But what you're doing is you are creating this team. All these decks have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you are going to be using these cards to try and attack the mastermind and the scenario that you're trying to overcome. But of course, the game is fighting back against you by throwing these henchmen and villains against you, or striking you with these master schemes that are going to hurt you in really bad ways by maybe forcing you to take wounds which will clog up your hand, or discard cards and so on. All the things you'd expect with a deck building style game. But the sheer variability and the variety of scenarios and characters and enemies in this game is quite mind-blowing, where you'll never play the same game twice. I must have played this game 60, 70 times, and I don't think I ever had a similar game. And one thing that really impresses me about the Legendary system is the game arc, because it always seems like you start off moderately, the enemy starts to overcome you, and you start to get battered, thinking there's no way I can come back from this. And then that power dynamic slightly changes as you get those more powerful cards into your deck, and you can start almost chipping away. And they'll always come down to a very fine margin. At least 9 times out of 10 it would work out that way. But yeah, I was always impressed with how different each game worked out. And if you just want to have 1 or 2 games in your collection, this is a great one to have, because again, you'll never play the same game twice. So that is Legendary at number 3. At number 2, I have Letter Jam. Now, this is a deduction word game, which is quite an interesting combo, where you are trying to work out these letters that are facing away from you, but you can see everybody else's, and of course they can see yours, but they can't see their own. And what you're doing is you are giving out clues by trying to build words out of the letters in the mix. by placing these kind of order tokens. And basically, whoever can give the best clue will place these order tokens, and you're writing down the knowledge that you know. And of course, sometimes you might have an order token in front of you, but you don't know the letter. So you're trying to work out what that letter could be. And with each letter you work out will kind of consist towards an anagram that you'll hopefully reveal as endgame scoring. It's a very interesting game. I like the way that you have to spread the clues out. It's not like the best player can always keep on giving clues out because they're never going to work out their own letters. And it's actually quite a funny game. I wasn't expecting this game to be as funny as it was, because sometimes you can be so sure on your answer and put your letters in a particular order, thinking I've got this nailed, but then at the end you reveal the letters and it's nothing like you predicted, which just always makes me laugh. Additionally, the game scales very well in difficulty, because you can play quite an easy game with 5 letters, or you can play a very difficult game with, say, 7 letters or more. So yeah, you can definitely tailor that difficulty to your particular game group. And to be honest, even when I feel this game is easy, I end up doing poorly anyway. So it's definitely a game that can trick you. But I think that cooperative deduction word game trio come together very well. It has a mass appeal because anyone can really get this. It's not terribly difficult to play. And yeah, it just works really well, and probably better than it should do. So that is Letter Jam at number 2. Okay, so for number 1, I have slightly cheated by choosing 2 games for that spot, and that is because I kind of put them in the same category, and I don't really talk about one without talking about the other. So the games I'm talking about are Just One and So Clover. So these are 2 more word games, and certainly have a party feel to them. So Just One, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you'll know what Just One is all about. It's been a colossal hit with almost every gamer I've ever spoken to. It's a game where you have a clue card. Somebody is not going to know what the clue is. Everybody else is going to write a word down associating to that clue. They're going to show each other before they show the guesser, and any duplicates are removed. And then it's going to be up for the clue guesser to guess what the word is. So you want to be obvious enough so the clue guesser will guess the correct answer, but not too obvious where the point where everybody is writing the same answer, because they'll cancel each other out. Such a cool concept. It works beautifully, and I can't criticize the game at all. I think it is that much fun, and a true game that anybody can play, drop in and out of. It's just a blast. The second one, So Clover, is just a step above. It's another word association style game where you have these predetermined words on these cards, and you're placing them in this kind of plastic clover board. And where these words meet each other, you're going to write a particular clue linking them together. And some of these words do not want to match, so you have to be quite creative with the words you come up with. And then after you've written your clues down, you're going to remove those cards, shuffle them up, add another one, and it's up for your teammates to try and put them back in the right order. Both these games are great word association games. Again, games that feel low stakes, but they still require a degree of creativity. And yeah, they're as good as party games get, and as good as cooperative games get, in my opinion. Now, I understand they're not heavy, complex, involved games with lots of strategy, but sometimes that is not always necessary. And for me, these are 2 perfect examples of that, where gameplay just trumps everything. So that is So Clover and Just One at joint number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Before I wrap up, I want to give a few honourable mentions out there and some narrow misses. So Unusual Suspects was one that I like, a very silly party game. Shadows over Camelot, an oldie but a goodie. Paperback, another word game that I tend to like these cooperative word games. For a more frantic experience, games like Escape, Curse of the Temple. Spirit Island, a fantastic heavy Euro game that it didn't quite work for me in terms of being a bit overwhelming, and I was so bad at it, but gameplay wise it is pretty magnificent. And even some silly games like The Mind I've enjoyed over the years, The Grizzled, Micro Macro, and even like older cooperative games like Randy Knizia's Lord of the Rings. So yeah, there's just a few examples there to mull over and check out if your tastes align with mine. But again, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.